And we are live. I wonder if there are any humans out there, Sophie. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you? I see you've got me as Sophie Five Flames Bennett. I like it.
Do you like that? I think you put that there, but yeah, I've kept it. I'm hoping that anybody who's tuning in is tuning in from a deck chair in their garden. It's a glorious day. It's absolutely beautiful out there. Is it beautiful where you are?
It is. It's the first day of summer.
Love it. I've got a proper professional introduction, which I'm going to use, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong, because it's beautifully written, and we're going to be talking about writing, right? So let me get it right. So my guest is Sophie Bennett, and Sophie knows the value that books bring to speakers. Her first book brought her in her first invitations to speak 7 years ago. That book transformed her writing business into a speaking business. Her second book was written specifically to take her speaking business to a corporate audience, and it worked. I'm going to be quizzing you on that. It's turned her into an authority in the field of motivation. It's helped her land major corporate clients and was the reason she was invited to become a visiting lecturer at Cranfield School of Management. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
She has coached and ghostwritten for many other speakers too. She ghostwrote a book on the future of technology for a previously unknown Dutch futurist. That book helped him to more than quadruple his speaker fees. And I'm going to talk to you about that too.
Yay.
He went from speaking at small local events in the Netherlands to speaking in 12 countries and stadium audiences the year after the book came out. She's coached clients with thought leadership books on sales, overcoming adversity, strategy, and leadership. Oh, and she spent 4 years as head of content for Dell. And most importantly, Sophie, and probably the most exciting project you will ever have in your entire book working life, you are helping me write my book.
Absolutely. Get all that mine of information and all that experience out of your head and into the heads of others where it also belongs.
Oh, my goodness. And actually, okay, so I've got loads of questions to ask you, but let's start, first of all, with, and one of the things that I found very hard, say you've decided to write a book, or you're going to do it, you're a speaker. How do you come up with the title that is going to be compelling? I mean, like, the 7 habits of highly effective people, it's been done. Start with why, it's been done. Lean in, it's been done. How did you find that really fantastic title?
Well, just think how famous those authors became if they weren't already on the back of their books. I mean, Covey, nobody had really heard of before he wrote The 7 Habits. So those were landmark books, and there's plenty of others. But I think the first thing to do is the book title has to deliver a promise. And the subtitle ideally needs to deliver either the people that are going to read it or the promise. You can do it either way round, and the subtitle and title works really well together. So I'll start with a story of a disastrous one, which was my first book, which I just got the title completely wrong. At the time, I thought it was quite humorous. People did remember it, so you need to be memorable, right? Because you talk a lot about that in your speaker work as well, but it was memorable for all the wrong reasons. So I called the book Money Bondage, The Power of Mind Over Money, which was the subtitle. So the subtitle was fine, but the title just gave people the wrong impression. And I'm amazed that I got so many speaker bookings off that. But it was a good book. And between the covers, people absolutely loved it. Between the covers. Okay, so that sort of goes to the title, doesn't it? Right. It's already put your mind in the wrong direction. But it did get me on a few stages. But I learned quite quickly that book was not, it got covered, it did get covered in the Sunday Times. I had a piece in the Telegraph. I had a full 1.5 pages in Metro with a half-page photograph, which was brilliant. And that got me my first speaking gigs. So it wasn't perfect. And it was, I think, a huge mistake in retrospect. But it did fulfill one of the big criteria, which was it was memorable and it got noticed. However, if you want to write a book to enhance your speaking career, I wouldn't recommend a sort of a book title with that sort of inclination, shall we say. So the best ones have a really well thought out combination of title and subtitle. And the title or subtitle, doesn't really matter which way around it is, delivers on what the reader is going to get. So let me give you a good example. I coached a person, actually, a lovely lady who was a leadership coach, and she had a couple of corporate clients already. She was fairly established, but she wanted to expand the speaking side, and she was also writing a new program, a new leadership program. She didn't have a market for it yet, but she knew what her specialization was. So after several conversations and lots of thinking, and I said, Sue, tell me what it is with your knowledge that you get people to actually do differently. She said, I get people to stop thinking about things and stop doing everything themselves and start being able to delegate properly in a way that really helps the people that are being delegated to. So it's not a power thing. So I said, okay, so you tell people to stop doing stuff and start leading people. And she went, yeah. That was the book title. Okay. Stop doing, start leading. Now, at the time,
powerful. I like that. That's
it's
really
powerful.
Good.
That's right. And Charles Wasman had recently brought out a book with that sort of start, stop concept. And that had hit the bestseller lists about 6 months before. So people were quite familiar with that tone and style. So we thought we'd piggyback off that because it was a completely different topic. But here's the other thing that we did, which is quite clever. If you think about a book title on Amazon, you get a little thing of the cover, don't you? And then the first couple of lines. So if your book title is too long, it sort of falls off, especially on a mobile phone as well. So you want to try and keep it quite tight. So what we did with hers was, if you think of a book cover as a graphic, right? It's not just words. So we actually put this little thing in that said leadership at the top. So when the Amazon result came up, what it actually said was leadership. Stop doing, start leading. So immediately, if somebody was looking for a leadership book and they were overwhelmed, that was exactly what they wanted to change. And we knew that's what her talk and her courses and her training all delivered. So it genuinely reflected who she was and what she delivered. And we use the subtitle to just build on that a little bit. So the subtitle just expanded and said, how to shift from doing the work yourself to becoming a great leader.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So, can I interrupt with questions? Because I know you've got so much.
Absolutely. Go for it. This is a conversation, isn't it?
Here's the thing, right? We're starting with titles, and we said we'd start with titles because it was a great place to start, and I get that. But shouldn't the title come after you've decided what the content is going to be, or is the title the starting point?
The title can change. I think you need a working title.
Oh, like films do. Films have working titles.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a working title will help you to define exactly who you're writing for and exactly what the topic and the point you need to keep coming back to.
Right. So that's your
in the book.
Okay. And which you've decided before you write the book, of course.
Absolutely. If you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know what stories to tell, you don't know the relevance of your story and how to write it as a metaphor, because even your story is not about you, right? It's a metaphor for other people's experience, because you want people to sit there reading the your story piece, which might be a piece on its own, or it might weave its way through the book. That depends on the style. But you want people to sit there reading, thinking, oh, that's happened to me. Oh, I relate to that. Well, this person gets me. They understand what I'm going through, because they're the people that are going to potentially book you.
Super. And you said something else which I thought was really interesting. So if I had seen a title of a book that was very similar to one that I want to write, so you said Charles Wasman had released her book and had the stop and start, that might have put me off. But you guys said, right, we're going to piggyback on this. So can I have the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Speakers?
Why not? People would remember it, wouldn't they?
I'm going to, because the content won't work. But so you could do things like that. And I imagine it's been done. I imagine people have done that. Yeah?
The first thing to do is do an Amazon search on your working titles to see what's already out there. So I wanted to call my third book Fired Up, because the 5 parts of my system, or 5 parts of my motivation model, spell FRIED, but when I looked up Fired Up, they were all barbecue books. All right. So you don't expect some of this stuff to happen. In hindsight, I probably could have got away with it, but I wanted something more original that people wouldn't forget.
And how important on that subject, so say you did decide to go and write a barbecue book, how important is it for you to stay within the area of expertise that you want to be known for and not veer off it and stay on brand and on message? Is that, or can you write different books? Does it work?
Well, you can write more than one book. Not every book has to be the classic 30 or 40,000 words. There's some great books out there that are 5 and 6 and 8,000 words. There was a book called Fish, which was a leadership book based on the experiences, I think, at the Chicago fish market. And it's a tiny little book, and it's only that thin, it's about 0.5 centimetre thick. But
so I could publish mine now. I don't have to keep writing.
No. You can keep them really short. So some people effectively do series of books.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they might do a guide to this and then a short guide to that. And if you can keep a theme. So I thought about, and somebody's probably going to pinch this now, but you're welcome to it because I'll never get around to it. But you've heard it here first. Anyway. But the little black book of, or the little red book of, you could have the little black book of motivation, the little black book of employee engagement, the little black book of leadership, the little black book of delegation. You could have a series. So I think just getting out of this limited mindset of it just has to be one and it has to be 30 to 40,000 words doesn't necessarily apply. Jan Carlson famously did a book called Moments of Truth. We're both old enough to remember that. But actually, Moments of Truth was also done initially as a series of cartoons. And he had 30,000 copies of the cartoons printed and sent to every member of staff, which was about 30,000 at the time. And it was legendary and it was amazingly effective. And although it's about 30 years old, it still had thousands of shares on SlideShare every year. So, because what we want as speakers is to get our message out, not necessarily to sell a lot of books. So there's lots of strategies around it. Let me just show you one, actually. So this is an example. You mentioned you were going to quiz me about the speaker who went from speaking to little local business audiences.
Well, I like the bit that you said in your intro that he quadruple his fee? That's the bit that interests me.
Yeah, more than quadrupled his fee, actually, 10 times his fee on one of his events. And he ended up speaking from like little business clubs in the Netherlands and small university, to students and things about innovation. And he went to speak to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Washington.
Wow.
To an audience of philanthropists. So
and you ghost wrote that.
I ghost wrote that, yes.
Before you share, tell me what ghostwriting really means. Sorry, someone who doesn't know, and how you would choose a ghostwriter. Sorry, I'm going off piste.
No, absolutely. So ghostwriting is when you have the idea and the concept, and you know what you want to write about, but you really may not want to sit down and write the book yourself, and B, you want some professional input to make sure it delivers on the job it's meant to do. So Christian came to me and said, I know you enjoyed my speech. We got speaking after him speaking. And I said it was really inspiring what I'd heard. And I said, have you got a book? Because I would have gone and read the book. And he said, no, I haven't. I'm thinking about writing one. So initially he took me on as a book coach and we did about 4 sessions. And by the 4th session, he said, I've just realized the magnitude of what I'm trying to do. English isn't my first language. And actually, would you write it for me? So he delivered to me his keynote online. He delivered me a few bits and bobs of research, and it was all over the place. It looked very complete until he started writing it, which is a classic. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's a classic thing. People think they've got the full idea and it's really well structured and all the holes are filled. But when they come to write it, it's not as complete as they think and they go into panic mode. And that's what Christian did. So I took the idea and then I did all the research around it. So where he had a concept around how farming was going to change in the future, for example, I spent a week learning about vertical farming and getting case studies and interviewing people that ran vertical farms and all that sort of thing. So I did that. Then I wrote that story and I was able to embellish it, and he edited it. Well, he didn't edit it. He just approved it basically as we went along. And it took about 5 months, that effort. But in the end, we had a big fight about the book title because I said, nobody's going to understand what the book title is all about. But he went with it and he was right. I came up with the subtitle And the subtitle, in fact, is often why he got booked, but the main title is why he got remembered. So the main title was Humanification, which nobody knew what it meant. But of course, he was going for a futurism market, and he really cared about what happened to people as technology develops.
Yeah.
So I get that. But the subtitle, Go Digital, Stay Human, is what got him all the conferences. Because he was going to events where people were looking at the future of business. So because we looked at it, I said, okay, who is your audience, Christian? And this is key for any speakers that want to write a book. I said, who is your audience and who is going to book you? And he said, right, my audience is business people. I said, any sector? He said, no, there can be any possible sector. I said, okay, that makes it a little bit more challenging, but we can run with that. And I said, what do you want them to think or do as a result of knowing what you know?
Great question. Great question, Sophie.
Yeah. And it's the same for a speech, isn't it? You know, if you're going to get booked for a speech, what is it that people are going to know or do differently as a result of knowing what you know? So he said, I want people to think more expansively about the future. I want them to see it from a different perspective. So I said, okay. So he was giving me all these stories, and he's had some great visuals on his keynote, and he had visuals of medical technology, and he had visuals of vertical farms, for example. So I said, tell you what, I said, why don't we write your book? So we'll get the main principle across, which was complicated because it was 7 different levels of how technology follows nature, how nature solves problems. And then we'll look at how that impacts on the future of healthcare, the future of farming, the future of cities, the future of smart transport. So we blocked it into 5 key areas in the end. Who did he get booked for? He got booked to do the International Accountants Federation in a stadium in Portugal to 17,000 people.
Wow.
Amazing. He got booked to do a global tour for them, and he ended up speaking in a main stadium in Sydney, at Sydney Harbour. He spoke at the Opera House. So he had these series of amazing gigs, but they were very specific because he was getting booked for healthcare conferences, for agricultural conferences, and technology and smart city conferences. And they were all pieces that we'd identified as being key audiences for him that could really benefit from his thought leadership. So we put more thought, I suppose, into what the book was going to deliver and to whom than we did into the content initially. And the content came out of that thinking.
I like that.
Yeah, what most people tend to do is they say, okay, I'm going to put everything I know into a book because it's really worked in the training room or it's really worked in the auditorium, and we've got to share it. But actually, it works best if you flip it around. Yeah.
And so it was interesting. You said that when he started putting it together, he thought he had it all laid out and thought out. And so I started writing my book in 2019 with the intention of having it finished by Christmas 2019 and out for 2020. And I got halfway through and I stopped. And it wasn't because I haven't got the content. It's just I just got stuck and it sat there. It sat there for over a year until you came along and you just sort of re-inspired me, and really your coaching has been so invaluable. But you said to me, Maria, you've been suffering from thought spaghetti, and I didn't even know that was an affliction. Can you explain thought spaghetti and see if anybody else recognizes it? And do let us know if you're experiencing it too. Somebody said, hi, ladies. I don't know who you are because you haven't allowed StreamYard to say your name, but thank you. Hello. And if you have questions, put them in the comments if you have questions. So talk to me about thought spaghetti.
Thought spaghetti. Okay, so when you get uncooked spaghetti, this is your thoughts before you have a book, right? You think they're all in line. You can organize it on the kitchen counter and get it all straight again if you spill it, right? Easy.
Yes.
Right. And that's what most people's thinking, they think is like. They start writing it down and the themes start getting tangled up with the stories, start getting tangled up with the output, start getting tangled up with past experiences, which gets tangled up on what you want people to think, which gets tangled up in what you want people to do. And once you've started writing without a proper plan, you end up with thought spaghetti. And then, of course, you get loss aversion because you think, well, I don't want to throw it away. I've put all this effort. I've written 10,000 words and I've got so many thoughts in there. Now I don't want to lose anything. But you're in spaghetti land. And once you get into spaghetti land, it's literally like trying to untangle the cooked spaghetti on a plate compared to the spaghetti before it's cooked. And
unless you have a bit of sauce, a bit of oil, which helps, which is Sophie.
Yeah, and then you add that to the loss aversion that you're starving hungry and you've got this plate of spaghetti that you do not want to throw away, but you know you can't eat it or you can't use it. And it's a real affliction. It's very uncomfortable.
No. Okay, so it's. But the other thing you said to me, which was really fascinating, you compared my work to a bit of Swiss cheese. Really, you said there were a lot of holes in it.
Yeah, that's typical, and I think it's a good thing because here's the thing that people don't get until they've actually been through the process of writing a book or trying to write a book, is that you think your thinking is complete. But a book is not like a talk, it's linear. You have to at some level, start at the beginning and finish at the end. Unless you're writing something that's designed in really tiny, short chapters that doesn't build on itself. And I think all good books build on themselves. So because it's linear and people aren't used to thinking in a linear way, you end up with these piles of ideas all in the wrong order and they're all intertwined. So once you've said, oh, and we've already talked about this, and then you realize that what the chapter that you've said that in actually needs to be first, then once you've done that 10 times, you get yourself in such a state.
I've read books like that. I've actually read books that have been published like that, where they keep referring, and it's like really irritating. It's like, no, just give me
nuts, doesn't it?
I stopped. I won't mention what it was. One recent. I stopped reading it. Reading it
because your brain can't think back that far. And there's a funny thing about books. Number one is that you might be writing it, but you think about when you read a book, most people read it in their own inner voice. So your words become their words. Now that doesn't happen when people digest a speech. When they're listening to a speech, it's your voice that they're hearing.
Yeah.
But when they read a book, it's their voice that they're hearing. So actually they own the content in a different way. Because they're reading it out loud to themselves in their head. So there's an ownership thing as well. The language needs to be slightly different.
Yeah, but also for me, Sophie, I tend, if I'm reading a novel, I will always read the end to find out what's happened, and then I start at the beginning. When I'm not terrible. When I'm reading a business book, I won't necessarily read it in a linear way. There's some authors that I do because I think they just write so beautifully that I have to absorb every single, and I've got certain authors that I adore, and I do that. But there are others where I think, well, I don't want to read about that bit now, and I'll skip. So if they're referring me to other parts of the book, that's going to irritate me if I can't. Would you agree that a chapter or a section needs to stand alone as well?
Yeah, so this is connected into the whole thought spaghetti idea. So brilliant point. And that is modular is how you monetize.
Modular is how you monetize. Okay,
yes.
Expand that sentence for me.
Okay, so if you think of your spaghetti again, each piece of spaghetti needs to have one clear idea and it needs to stand alone from the other piece of spaghetti. Because if you put ideas together in an ordered way, people can follow along, they can link it up for themselves. And sometimes you can use graphics for that. So speakers are very good at using models and graphics to be able to bring a whole lot of complex thinking together. You can do that in a book as well, of course. You've got the ability to use graphics. But modular is how you monetize. Because if you think of your book, it shouldn't just be a thing on the side of your business. The best books are actually the ecosystem of the business.
And that's a different way of thinking about books. I don't think people think about books in that way.
No, they tend to think of them as a standalone. So if you look at Covey, for example, his consulting practice, his 7 Habits consulting practice was massive because each one of his 7 habits, he could do a talk on one of the 7 habits, or he could do a talk on all 7 habits. Or he could do 7 talks, 1 on each habit. So that's what I've started to do, by the way, on the speaking side, is that I'm now doing 6 talks. Instead of doing the 5 flames of motivation as a talk, I do the 5 flames of motivation as an introduction talk. And then I do a deeper talk on flame number 1 and the behaviors and attitudes that go with it and the strategies that people can learn from. So now it's a series of 6.
Fantastic.
So I'm doing 6 sales instead of doing 1 sale for the same amount of effort. But, you know, what's interesting is you never know who's going to read your book.
That's true.
Last week, I think I mentioned it to you, actually, when we were having a private chat. I got invited to do a podcast for quite a big podcast for a particular software user community. And I was joined by their director of people development for Europe. And under his umbrella, if you like, I think he's responsible for about 15,000 people. So a budget holder, wouldn't you agree, Maria? You know, a good,
yes, absolutely,
a good solid budget holder that might book a speaker, and is responsible particularly for people development with specific interest in employee motivation and engagement. So right, my target audience. So we came on the podcast and we had a great conversation. It was recorded. It comes out at the end of April. And after the podcast had finished, we stayed online. And this guy said to me, I read your book cover to cover on the weekend, over the weekend. I loved it. Now, I had no idea. He bought the Kindle book, so I've got no idea who buys it because Amazon don't share that data with you. But there's no way I could have got in a director of a massive global software company's head at director level any other way. And I probably gained 7 to 8 hours of his time.
Wow.
One-on-one, him reading my material. So when we came on the podcast, he sounded so familiar, knew exactly what I was talking about. And I thought that was a bit bizarre. And then he told me he'd read the book. How else can you get that level of attention? I don't know any other method.
Phenomenal.
No.
Sophie, so we've got some comments. Let's view some of the comments here. So Amy Rowlinson says that I have totally got thought spaghetti and in spaghetti land. It's going to put me off my pasta here. I've got another Facebook user who says, love that. Modular is how you monetize. So powerful, like that. And somebody else loving the insights. If you have any questions, do feel free to post them. I will come back to them if we end up deep into a part of the conversation. So I will come back. I'll keep an eye. So, okay. How do you unravel the thought spaghetti then? It's the modular is the approach, is it?
The modular is key. So one of the key concepts in good writing, and I haven't just written books because as you mentioned in the intro, I was head of content for Dell, and that was a massive thought spaghetti operation because the idea there was to take even more complexity than speakers have in their business and their content. I had to take a whole range of products, sales ideas, concepts, case studies, and put it into a global database. And we ended up with about 120,000 modules of content. And it was my job to work out how they fitted together, how you stitch them together in a coherent bid document, right? So I'm used to thinking in pieces like that. But if you think of any one of your pieces of content, you've got several levels of it. So you have the surface level where you say, you ask the question, why is this important? You answer the question, which is that question and answer would be one chunk of content. And then you've got a story that maybe illustrates it. That's another chunk of content. And then you have a learning from the story and the question, which is another chunk of content. And each time you're going slightly deeper. And when you've got chunks like that and you write in chunks and think in chunks, not easy in Word, by the way, there's some much better software out there that will help you do the chunking concept. Can you share the software? Yeah, absolutely. It's Scrivener.
Which is what we're using.
Yeah, Literature and Arte, Scrivener is brilliant. And you can look at it's virtual post-it note software that gives you lots of writing tools. It's really clever stuff. Anyway, so if you think in chunks, then you have the reason modularization is monetization is because once you have the chunk, you can reuse that chunk in lots of different media. So that one chunk, that one story, that one idea, that one insight on its own, if it stands alone, it could be a video, It could be a training course. It could be a talk. It could be a talk series. So when you keep your stuff separate, like uncooked spaghetti, it's really easy when you've decided on the final order and sequence to stitch it all together. So here's how really good writers do it in the business books. And I have decoded about 40 business books. I made a massive mind map of the structure of Malcolm Gladwell, Dan Pink, some of the real big hitters.
My favorites.
Yeah. And I said, okay, how did they structure their content? And Gladwell particularly is easy peasy because he uses a repeatable chapter structure that never changes. Okay. And what Gladwell does is he opens in a certain way, always opens with a story, delves into, he has a big chunk, which is the lesson, the life lesson, if you like. Then he has another chunk, which is his view on the lesson and his opinion on the lesson. And then he has a closing piece, and then there's a link piece to the next chapter or section. So if you think about how a reader consumes a book, when you read a piece in a book and you put your bookmark in and you turn the light off, go to sleep, whatever you're going to do, the next time you pick up the book, what most people do is they look at the last few sentences of the previous chapter and then start on the next one to reorientate themselves about where they are. So good navigation in a book is just as important as it is on a website. And if you think about how you do that, if you've got all your modular pieces, right, which might be your speech compressed or expanded, you've also got your training course for your book. All you need to do is write the link piece, and it's sort of the last thing you do. So I always write the body of content. I don't write it in sequence. I have a sequence and I stick to the sequence roughly when I'm writing, but I don't write the links because I might want to change it at the last minute.
I'm going to look through my book now that we're working on and see if I've got any links. That's interesting. I like that. I like that. Very clever. And yeah, I have seen that in the books that I particularly enjoy. I actually quite like that repetitive structure because you become comfortable with it. And it does tend to happen that I end up buying lots of books by one author, and I recognize that they use the same structure, and it's like a familiar film or a film, series that you want to see all the different versions, all the follow-up episodes of that film.
It's like a good song, Maria, isn't it? A good song has a hook and a rhythm to it.
Yeah.
And people get familiar with the rhythm of it. So I always say to people, they say, well, if I use the same structure all the way through, won't it get boring? And I say, well,
no.
You ever get bored of your favorite song when the chorus comes on? And people say, no, we'll give people the predictability. They get into the rhythm of that. And I've got a video on the because I've got an online course about all this stuff. There's a video about writing in that rhythm and actually planning the structure of your chapters before you even put the content in.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I liked, you're talking about navigating. That's important in the book. It's important on the website. It's important everything that you write. It's important in your speech that you actually navigate and you have a structure. And so it's actually, do you find that when people write books, and apologies if you hear coughing, my little dog is coughing in the background.
Oh.
I know. Do you find that the process of writing a book actually improves your content as a speaker?
Well, that's the surprising element that people don't expect, because there's two elements to that. Number one, you fill in the holes in your technical knowledge of your topic or your subject, and it forces you to look outwards to other points of reference, maybe other writers, white papers, stuff to back up your view. And the second bit that really surprises people is that they get more on stage confidence. And that's because they know their stuff. Yeah.
So when you become an author, you become an authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives people, to use Antoinette Dale Henderson, who's done really well with her books, hasn't she? And she's used that as a great platform for her. It gives people more gravitas. So it gives you that self-confidence that I speak on motivation, and I'd read a lot about motivation. I'd read a lot of psychology, but not with a purpose in mind. And when I did the book, I read 30 other people's books to make sure I had a good, solid, technical background, and I'd read all the important works, and I'd read the research, and I'd read the white papers. So by the time I finished the book, I was genuinely an expert, not just from my own experience, but I'd done as much work as most people would do for a psychology degree. So, and that gave me a level of confidence that I couldn't have got just from my own story. And I found that time and time again with working with authors.
And I'm going to consider myself an author now, though I've not published yet. Because you're working with me. I will be by the time you finish with me. So what's interesting is that when we started working together, one of the things I'd said to you is that I had read as many of my competitors' books as I could, because I wanted to know, where I was going to differ from them, so that my book has some kind of USP in the marketplace, but also where I agreed with them and where I disagreed. But the best question you asked me when we started working together was, which books have you really enjoyed reading, and what is it about them, and which books haven't you enjoyed, and what is it about them? And you made me write that down, and that was such a good exercise, because it gave you an insight into what a good book for me would be. Is that an exercise that people should do?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two. Number one is do some reading. If you're going to write a book, start reading first of all, and just find the tone and style that you like, because then you can look at the structure more deeply, or just mimic it. Some people just can instinctively copy a style, and that just helps you find your own voice. But trying to find your own voice from nothing is really difficult. So I'd say grab a couple of authors you like, read them several times, maybe take one chapter and read it 10 times till you start to see the language patterns that they use. Some people are more formal, some people are very funny, some people are good at doing humor, some people write very personally, so you feel like you're in an in-depth quiet conversation in the corner of a bar somewhere, and you get that feeling of intimacy. Other people are very good at telling grand stories, and you get a very different feel. And I think the best thing that any speaker can do particularly is write in a voice that they're going to use on stage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because the worst thing that could happen is you write beautifully and then you go on stage and you've got a completely different tone and style.
I had that the opposite way around. I've got a speaker that I really, really like. I love the content, and read, I won't use a gender so it doesn't identify anybody, read the latest book, and I thought, oh gosh, I really don't like it. And then I found out that a ghostwriter had been used, but obviously that ghostwriter hadn't got that tone, hadn't got the speaker's tone. Got a couple more comments, and we've got time. We've got Sophie till 1:15, so we've got time for some questions too. So writing a book is like writing a PhD. Yes, really useful session. Thank you, helping me get my clunky draft finished sometime. And that's Andy Jarvis. So we've got something for you actually. So before we go to Q&A, let me share with you that we've got something very special for you from Sophie. Is that all right if I do that now?
Absolutely.
So Sophie mentioned, and I'll put it in the Facebook group because I can't write comments on here apparently, but Sophie's got an online training course which covers all of this. I think it's something like 31 videos telling you all the different ways you can monetize your content, help with the title, guidance on publishing or self-publishing, chapter templates, help on style, a planner, a thought-out book planner, all the stuff you've shared with us that will allow people to write the right book and build their speaking business and get paid more, basically, is what we all want to do. So as a member of the group, you get that course like everybody else for $4.99, but Sophie is throwing in 2 coaching sessions, one-to-one coaching sessions with you, which actually wipes out the cost of that. You're effectively getting the course for free. And to get that special offer, you need to sign up for the course by close of play next Monday, Bank Holiday Monday. And I'll put all the links in the group so you can see them, or you can message me if you want me to share those again. But I'll tell you what, a couple of sessions with Sophie, is just amazing. I'd literally given up on my book, started working with you, and I'm loving it now. I hated writing it. I'm loving writing my book.
Well, it's a process of thinking, Maria, isn't it? It's having somebody to help you think clearly. And like with Sue, I showed you that Stop Doing, Start Leading book. I mean, she wrote that about 4 years ago, and she had this vision for a course because she wasn't so much as a speaker as a trainer. And she wanted to do an online course, but she was struggling with the structure of that as well, because she had all these interlinked ideas. Right. and again, it's this modular thinking. I said, okay, let's break it down. Let's look at the hierarchy. So I think the first 2 coaching sessions, and I do them for about 90 minutes each, even 2 hours. I don't clock watch, right? We worked out what the building blocks were, what they had to know before they could know something else. So we worked out what that hierarchy was. And in fact, the book became a template for our online course. And she sent it to the first proof copies. She sent one of them to her biggest corporate customer, who booked her like 10 times a year for in-room training. Wow. And on the back of the book, they bought 500 licenses for her modular online course, and she hadn't even filmed it. Because the structure of the content was so clear, and the building blocks were so well thought out. And she literally paid for the book. I think she made about 200. I can't remember. It was a lot of money. I mean, it was a lot of money. Before she even published, and so she sold lots and lots of licenses. So that was brilliant news. And that's the sort of clarity of thought. And some people, I wrote a book with one person, ghost wrote the opening chapter. So we had a steer, and then did book planning with him. And I asked him, I said, who are you writing for? And he wanted to get the book into the New York Times. And I said, why? He said, well, I've got one person. He was in mergers and acquisitions in Wall Street. And he said, because there's only one person I want to work with on a deal. And the only way I can get in front of them is through the New York Times.
Wow.
I was like, so you're writing the book for one person? And he was going to pay me a lot of money to ghostwrite it. I said, look, let's do it differently. I said, let's write the opening and then write the chapter of content. So we'll really think through the structure about what you want to share. And then we'll send the New York Times a press release. And on the back of that, see if you can't get a meeting. And he got his meeting. He never did write the book, but he got the job. But that was, again, that's thinking about who was going to read it, what did they want to get out of it, and what was the purpose of writing the book? Who was it for? What did it deliver? And why was it being written? And they sound really simple questions, but are you, if you're writing as a speaker, are you writing for the audience, or are you writing for the booker?
Or for yourself, for your own vanity.
Absolutely. So
the other, because we're rapidly running out of time, so I have another question for you. Many people believe that the book will make them money, but it's not. The book itself won't necessarily do that, will it?
No, and often, unless you've got a big publisher, and that's changed as well, by the way. So let's just talk about publishing, which is where people expect to make money from book publishing. So if you've got a book that's selling for 20 quid and your book, not many sell for that amount these days, but let's say it's a thick, high-end one, it's $16.99, and you get it in Waterstones, or you get it on the W.H. Smith airport shelves when airports open again. Number one, you will pay for the slot on the shelf up front. You might have to pay 10 or 20,000 to get it in. So forget bestseller lists. They are sponsors lists. Right? It's a complete misnomer. So it's not that book has been well published or it's brilliant. It's the fact that it's paid to be on that particular shelf.
Wow.
And the only people that can get those shelves as an option are the big publishers. So if you want to get on W.H. Smith's bestseller list, you need to be published by Hodder and Stoughton, Wiley, Penguin, one of the big ones. And to do that, they have, because of self-publishing has made it so easy to publish a book, you now have to pay the publishers in the main. You don't get an advance, it's the other way around. So the most recent book contracts I've seen have involved commitments to buy around 3,000 books.
I've heard this.
At cover price. So the last contract I looked that I said to the author, somebody came to me for coaching. She said, I've got a publishing contract with one of the biggies. And I said, great, send it over. Let's have a look. When I read the small print, she was committed to buying or selling. It didn't matter. They don't care who buys the book. If nobody else does, the author has to buy it, is the way the contracts are written. She was committed to buy £45,000 worth of her own book if she didn't sell enough copies.
Wow.
Right. So they completely turned it around. She wasn't convinced that I was reading it right. And I said, okay, spend £100, join the Society of Authors, use their legal team, because you can do that. If you join the Society of Authors, you can get their legal experts. They've got contract experts, publishing experts. Go and join. It'd be cheaper than going to an independent lawyer. Get the contract reviewed and then see what they say. They got the contract back and she said, I'm going to have to buy £45,000 worth of books unless I can sell them. And the thing about the publishers is they will give you a marketing push for like a fortnight. And then if it doesn't fly off the shelves, or they haven't secured a space on an airport bookshelf or in Waterstones or something, or Richard and Judy's book club, which is very difficult anyway for non-fiction books particularly, then you're out on your own. And that's where people get caught out. So, you know, publishing is not the same as it used to be. And self-publishing is much easier than it used to be. But which one you choose depends purely on who you're trying to reach and what your purpose is. And Christian, for example, wanted a lot of people on his mailing list so he could communicate his futurism ideas. And he ended up giving his book away on Kindle, but he's had 600,000 downloads, Maria.
Wow. Well, Sophie, listen, we've run out of time. Just to remind everybody that
we've just got started.
I know. I remind everybody we've got a very special offer here available till the 5th of April, midnight 5th of April, where people can buy your online training course, which is called Book Writing for Speakers. So it's specifically for speakers. I'll put the link in the group, and they get 2 free one-to-one sessions. And you can see the value in 45 minutes that Sophie has given. Imagine what she can do when she's focused entirely on you and your book. I'll tell you, it's amazing. It's fantastic. Sophie, I cannot thank you enough. You are such a font of knowledge. I feel flamed. I feel like I have 5 flames with me today.
Yeah. Have we got any Q&As that we want to answer, or should we do them in the group afterwards if any come in?
Yeah, we'll do them in the group afterwards. I think we just had joined late. We'll watch the recording. We haven't got any questions. I think you've obviously covered so many things, but we can check in the group if there's any more questions, because you're part of the group and people can ask. So
brilliant.
Thank you.
Remember, modular is monetise. Keep that to a minimum.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Sophie.
Thanks for having me, Maria.